Freemasonry. It's a world that's often wrapped up in mystery and a whole lot of speculation. But what if we could actually get a look inside? Not from the outside looking in, but by using one of their own respected guidebooks. Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're taking a journey through The Freemason at Work, which is this fantastic collection of questions and answers put together by the Masonic scholar Harry Carr. Together, we're going to see how Freemasons learn, how they question, and how they evolve their own traditions. This sentence right here from the book's introduction is really our jumping-off point. It just captures the whole spirit of the Masonic journey. See, it's not just about memorizing some lines or going through the motions of a ritual. It's about this deep, driving curiosity, a need for more information that pushes a new member, a neophyte, to really dig for knowledge. And it's that spirit of asking why that's going to guide us through this whole explainer. So let's follow that path. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of that seeker. We're going to trace the kinds of questions a brand new Mason might have, and we'll use Harry Carr's methodical approach as our map. This isn't about spilling secrets, but really about understanding the process of inquiry itself. And this quote, this is the promise from our guide. Harry Carr was a huge deal in Masonic scholarship, and his work was all about this really rigorous, evidence-based approach. No wild assumptions, no romantic stories, just a patient, careful look at historical documents. So as we go through this, we're going to follow his lead. Facts first, always. You know, when a new Mason starts out, their journey kind of begins with learning a whole new language. It's a language of symbols, of phrases, and every single one is layered with history and meaning. So let's look at a couple of examples of how Carr helps a new member break this all down. Okay, here's a question straight out of the book. Darkness visible. It's a phrase used in Masonic ritual, and boy does it sound ancient and mysterious, right? But where does it actually come from? The answer is a great reminder that Freemasonry doesn't exist in a bubble. It's always pulling from the culture all around it. And there it is. The source is John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost. This isn't some obscure, secret Masonic text. It's a giant of English literature. It just goes to show you that the ritual is woven together with threads from philosophy, from religion, and from art. It demands a kind of intellectual curiosity that goes way beyond the four walls of the lodge. Okay, fair enough. But what about a symbol that is like the definition of Masonic? The compass. Seems simple, right? Well, as Carr shows us, even the meaning and the ownership of a core symbol like this isn't totally set in stone. In fact, the answer has actually changed over the years. Just take a look at this table. It shows how a symbol's meaning can totally evolve. Back in 1723, a really important illustration connects the compass with the Grand Master, the big boss. But then, by the early 1800s, other sources are firmly linking it to the master of a single local lodge. The big takeaway here is that meaning isn't static. It gets assigned and reassigned over time. And this idea of evolution, it builds from just symbols to the entire structure of Masonic practice. I mean, if a symbol can change its meaning, what about the rituals themselves? Well, as Carr carefully documents, they are not some ancient, unchanging rites. They've been constantly developed and refined. Today, you think of a Mason's journey as moving through 3 symbolic degrees. But this idea that there have always been 3 neat little steps, entered apprentice, fellow croft, and master Mason, well, that's actually a historical myth. The path itself has a history. This timeline really clears it up. For centuries, the original operative Masons probably had a simpler 2-part system. We see records confirming that in Scotland from 1599. Even as late as 1696, the top tier was this combined master or fellow craft thing. It really isn't until the 1720s that we see hard evidence, like separate fees for each degree, that the 3-step journey we know today had finally become distinct and established. But this process of refinement didn't just stop in the 18th century. Not at all. Freemasonry is still adapting. And one of the biggest changes happened, surprisingly, recently, dealing with a part of the ritual that had become, well, a little controversial. 1986. I mean, that's within the lifetime of a lot of members who are active right now. The United Grand Lodge of England, which is the governing body for tons of lodges around the world, made this huge decision about the vows or obligations that members take. So for hundreds of years, these obligations included symbolic and, let's be honest, often gruesome physical penalties for breaking your vow of secrecy. Now, they were always understood as symbolic, but by the late 20th century, they were seen as a bit of a barrier for modern guys.
So, in 1986, boom, they were formally taken out of the vows. It's a perfect example of a tradition evolving to match the values of its time. But wait, how do we know so much about all these historical changes? Well, ironically, a lot of the evidence comes from Freemasonry's enemies. The historical record is full of these so-called exposures, books and pamphlets published to try and damage the fraternity by spilling all its secrets.
Carr points out the great paradox here. This publication from Richard Carlisle in 1825 was a vicious attack on the whole institution. But for historians today, it's an invaluable, perfectly preserved snapshot of how rituals were done in the early 19th century. The attacks from the past have become the archives of the present. Isn't that wild?
So, we've looked at symbols and rituals. Let's zoom out a bit to the lodge itself, the structure, the community, the rules that hold it all together. And once again, Carr shows us that these rules often come from very practical, very real historical events. Okay, this is a fantastic example. The rule that a new lodge needs a recommendation from an old one might just seem like a bit of formal paperwork, but Carr digs up the story of the Bacchus Lodge, a group in the 1760s that was using the cover of a Masonic lodge to run a secret ring of criminals and counterfeiters. So the rule isn't just a rule, it's a security measure born from a real-world problem. And the whole idea of community, of brotherhood, was baked in right from the very beginning. This rule, from the very first rulebook in 1723, explicitly tells members to go visit other lodges. It was never just about what happened inside your own four walls. It was about building a network and making sure everyone was on the same page. This leads to another point that I find fascinating. There isn't one single official script that all English lodges use. Instead, you have these different styles of performing the ritual, and they're called workings. And yet, Carr points out how truly remarkable it is that they all have the same essential core content. It's a system that allows for local flavor while keeping a universal foundation, a perfect balance of diversity and unity. And all of this brings us to our final and maybe the most important takeaway from our little journey through the Freemason at work. The process. It never really ends. Freemasonry, as Carr presents it, isn't some destination you reach. It's a continuous, lifelong journey of learning. This tribute to Carr in the book's preface just nails his whole philosophy. Memorizing the how, the words and the actions of a ritual, that's the easy part. The real, lifelong work is in understanding the why. Why this symbol? Why that phrase? Why this rule? That question, why, is the absolute heart of the Masonic intellectual tradition. Ultimately, Carr's book doesn't just give you a simple, neat answer. What it does is it traces the history, it presents the evidence, and it shows you how an idea has evolved. It basically points the way so that the seeker can find the answer for themselves. The goal isn't just to make a Mason, it's to create a researcher and a critical thinker. And that leaves us with one final thought. This whole principle of questioning, of digging past the how to really find the why, that doesn't have to stay inside a Masonic lodge. So what traditions, what assumptions, what rituals in your own life, personal or professional, are just sitting there, waiting for you to ask, why?